Thank you, Rick. I just want to say, come Monday, I'll have been here for 2 years, and what a privilege and honor it has been to serve with such fine people. Just a great cause to serve in the kingdom. So thank you, and thank you for your prayers. Way back in 1994, some guys got together and decided to found a hedge fund. But these weren't just ordinary guys. These were PhD Ivy League economists who were professors at Stanford and Harvard. And they felt like they could create a formula, a trading strategy, a trading model that could beat the market and make untold amount of wealth and money. So they partnered with a guy from Goldman Sachs and built this trading model. And unfortunately, the man from Goldman Sachs passed away early from cancer, and so they needed, being academics, they needed somebody that was a veteran Wall Street trader to partner with to execute the model, to execute the strategy. So they brought in a guy from Salomon Brothers, and Salomon Brothers was one of the elite Wall Street trading firms back in the early 90s. And they bring in one of the top traders from Salomon Brothers who brings a team with him from this firm. And these guys were known throughout Wall Street. These guys were the best. They even had a nickname. I won't repeat it here in chapel, but it implied that they had lots of chutzpah and testosterone. They were the guys. So you've got a dream team now. You've got all the guys with the street smarts and the savvy combining with the guys with all the brains. And they formed a hedge fund. They called it Long-Term Capital Management. And it went great. First few years, they had a 43% rate of return one year, a 41% rate of return the next year. And these guys, minimum investment to get into this fund when they started it was $10 million. Minimum investment. Their fees, 2% of assets under management plus 25% of the profits. Wow. These guys were raking it in, and they were killing the market. They were the dream team. They were the hottest name in town. They were smarter than everybody. They had it all figured out. In August of 1997, they had raised $6.7 billion from clients and themselves to manage. But on top of that $6.7 billion, they borrowed $120 billion to invest. Now, everybody in the room, their liver is quivering a little bit. So that sounds like a bad idea. But these guys don't need your common sense. They're the smartest guys in town. They're Ivy League PhD economists. They're the guys from Salomon Brothers. They're the best traders on Wall Street. They can take borrowed money and turn it into riches. And these guys were so hot, so cool, that in October of 97, the two professors that came up with this trading formula were awarded the Nobel Prize in economics. So you come to the end of 1997, and you've got a dream team of the savviest traders on Wall Street paired with two PhD Nobel Prize winning Ivy League economists. Nothing could go wrong. Nobody can beat these guys. Matter of fact, they're so confident in themselves, they return $2.7 billion of capital to their investors. And so you had 6.7 in August, then you return 2.7, so you're returning almost a third of your capital. Did they reduce their total amount of investments by a third as well? No, they replaced it with debt. These guys are great. They don't need to follow some of the regular rules. They don't apply to them. So, their leverage ratio goes up. Trouble starts brewing, though, in 1997. It doesn't affect them quite yet. So in 97, There was something called, and some of you may remember this, it was the Asian financial crisis. In Southeast Asia, there was a financial crisis. Thailand and several other Southeast Asian economies collapsed. And the thing is that international investors had poured money into these economies. And the investments are all going sour, and they're trying to get out as fast as they can. And here's how financial contagion works. Because a lot of these investors were investing, like long-term capital management, they were investing with borrowed money. So if you make an investment with borrowed money and the investment goes poorly, you still owe that money back. And you might be able to liquidate that bad investment and get pennies on the dollar. You might not. It might be unsellable. So what do you have to do to pay the loan back? You've got to sell a good investment to pay the loan back. And that's how contagion happens. So this Southeast Asian financial crisis, people are starting to sell their otherwise good investments to pay off the debt that they incurred to invest in Southeast Asia. And not only that, they started preemptively selling countries and investments that they believed were going to get impacted adversely by this crisis. So all kinds of emerging economies that weren't even in Southeast Asia started getting hit, including Russia. And in 1998, Russia declared bankruptcy as a nation. They defaulted on all of their ruble-denominated debt, the first Russian default since 1917. Yep. Yeah. A man named Vladimir Lenin decided he was not going to honor the Tsar's debts back in 17. That's not exactly the footsteps you want to follow in. So, long-term capital management up to this point, they had multiple trading strategies. They had thousands of positions. They were highly diversified. They felt like they were impregnable. But they had a common strategy, a common theme was kind of woven throughout their trading system. And I'm going to generalize here, so I apologize to any experts watching. But generally speaking, they believed that volatility would stay around a certain average, a certain mean, and that volatility in a market was evenly distributed. So if there was a high volatility event, it would quickly revert back to mean. It would quickly go back to average. So if volatility got high, it would quickly come back to normal. And they believe the same with bond spreads. Now, a bond spread is simply the difference in interest rates between safe bonds like treasuries and not so safe bonds like Russian bonds, other emerging market bonds, high yield American bonds that aren't considered investment grade. And so the difference in interest rates between those two is called a spread. And when the spread widens, it means people are selling the unsafe stuff, which makes the interest rate go up, and they're buying the safe stuff, which makes the interest rate go down. So the guys at Long-Term Capital Management believed that, like volatility, when spreads widen, it's a temporary thing, and that they will eventually narrow again. So when volatility goes up and when spreads widen, or when the market expects volatility to go up, or expects the spreads to widen, the smart thing to do, according to these guys, is to bet that volatility will go down and bet that spreads will collapse. So here we are with the American stock market now selling off because of some of the contagion from the Asian financial crisis, and people are getting worried and scared, so they're selling off a lot of their good investments to pay off bad ones, and they're just going to cash anyway. So these guys at Long-Term Capital Management are losing money. They're losing money because they had bet that volatility was going to be low and it's going high. They had bet the bond yield spreads were going to be narrow, not wide. And so what do? Do they change? Do they change their strategy? No. These are the smartest guys in town. They have a Nobel Prize. They're the top traders on Wall Street. They're right. The rest of the world is wrong. As a matter of fact, these guys bet against Warren Buffett. They shorted Berkshire Hathaway. And they bet that volatility would come down, that bond spreads would narrow. And they kept investing, and they kept investing accordingly. Problem is John Maynard Keynes is attributed to having said, the market can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. And volatility went higher than they ever expected it to go. Bond spreads widened further than they ever expected them to go. According to their model, it was a 6 standard deviation event, which according to Neil Ferguson, historian who did a financial history called The Ascent of Money, and he looked into this, a 6 standard deviation event is supposed to only happen once in every 4 million years in trading. So these guys, according to their model system, had a 6 standard deviation event happen, and they couldn't pay off their debt. Their investments were greatly diminished in value, and some of their investments, much of their investments, especially because they were investing in many assets that were thinly traded, were unsellable. They couldn't sell it at any price. Now here's the deal. If you owe the bank $1,000, that's your problem. If you owe the bank $1 million, that's the bank's problem. Well, these guys owed well over $100 billion to just about every major bank in the world. And of course, you adjust that for inflation too, and this is in $98 as well. So every bank in the world, every major bank in the world is sweating now, because here's the deal. It's not like these guys don't pay back the money and the banks go, well, that's just too bad. I guess we're going to have a bad quarter this year. No, the banks borrowed money to lend to these guys. They borrowed at a lower rate and lent it to these guys at a higher rate. And if the banks don't get their money back, they're going to default on their loans, and the bank's going to go under, and it's going to spread throughout the entire global financial system. So these guys have gone from being the hottest name in town to now the entire global financial system's about to collapse because they can't pay back any of their loans. Because everybody that was somebody, every bank that was a bank was lending to these guys, and these guys couldn't pay them back. So the New York Fed got together a consortium of 14 banks, and they bailed out the fund. And by bailed out, I don't mean they made these guys rich. They basically bailed themselves out. They gave them enough money to pay themselves back, and then they closed down the fund. These guys went from winning a Nobel Prize to losing their entire fund and their reputations. Now, how did this happen? Well, according to Ferguson, the model that these brilliant men, much smarter than me, created only used 5 years' worth of market data to create the trading strategy. Now, I was just a kid, but I remember the 90s, and most of you do too. The stock market was great in the 1990s. It'd be hard to make any trading strategy look bad in the 1990s. If they had just gone back 10 or 11 years in developing their model, they would have included the 1987 stock market crash, and they would have learned from some of the market's mistakes. But instead, they just looked at the good times and said, you know what, it's going to be like this all the time, and traded accordingly. And the other thing is that when they started taking losses, when they started, their strategy was clearly not working, they doubled down. They didn't change and rode it all the way to the ground. And it nearly brought down the whole financial system. So I'll tell you that story to tell you this one. Many years ago, in the nation of Israel, a bunch of guys got together and decided to found a monarchy. And God said through Samuel, not a good idea, guys. No, we want to do it. We want to get the biggest, tallest, handsomest, best warrior, smartest guy. We want to make him king. And he's going to assemble a dream team. He's going to get the guys, and they're going to, that was apparently the lesson they learned from the book of Judges. We read the book of Judges, and it's a very obvious lesson there. Their lesson was, we need a king. We need the dream team. We need to get the guys that are the smartest guys in the room, and we need them to defend us and take care of us. That was their lesson. So God says, okay, and he gives them a king. In 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1 and 2, there was a Benjamite, a man of standing. Nice family, lineage. A man of standing, whose name was Kish, son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son of Bechorath, the son of Aphiah of Benjamin. And he had a son named Saul, an impressive young man without equal among the Israelites, a head taller than any of the others. A man without equal. This is who God anoints as their king. They get what they want. They get a man without parallel. They get the dream team. And it goes well. He goes and rescues Jabesh Gilead, defeats the Ammonites, has a resounding victory, and has a second coronation, a rededication after that, and it's great. Everyone's this is working great. This is what we wanted. It's working. Well, Saul gets into a fight with the Philistines next, and Samuel has some orders for him. Hey, wait till I show up to offer the sacrifices, because we depend on God for our victories, not man. And Saul, Saul knows better. Saul's fresh off of a nice win. And so he waits for a little bit. He humors Samuel. He waits a little bit. But the men start getting scared and the men start running away. So Saul decides, you know what? I'm just going to take care of this myself. I'm just going to take over. I'm going to do this. And he does the sacrifice. And as we know from reading the Old Testament, you guys know it better than I do, the king taking on the priestly role is not a good idea. But he does it. He performs the sacrifices. And right after he finishes performing the sacrifices, Samuel shows up. What have you done? You have disobeyed God. And for that, you have lost your kingdom. Does Saul change? No, he doubles down. Because you skip a few chapters ahead and he's fighting the Amalekites. God tells him, go take out the Amalekites. Don't leave any of them standing for the atrocities that they have committed against my people. And Saul, okay, yeah, he'll go fight the Amalekites. He goes and wins. And he takes the best for himself and his men. He doesn't do what God commanded him to do. And Samuel shows up again and says, your kingdom will be torn from you and be given to someone better. And we know the rest of the story. Saul loses everything, and including his life in the end. So what do these two very different stories have in common? The fall of a monarchy and the fall of a hedge fund. Well, I see a couple of lessons. One, recent events don't necessarily dictate future results. Recent successes don't mean that we're invincible, that we will be able to carry on forever. The guys at Long-Term Capital Management just looked at 5 years of data and said, wow, this is great. And then they had a couple of good years and were like, man, we're unbeatable. We can take on Buffett. We can take on the world. Didn't work out well. Saul, the text doesn't go completely into what his inner thoughts were, but you can tell he clearly forgot about the young man who was running around chasing after his dad's lost donkeys, who didn't know anything, who didn't know what he was doing. He clearly forgot about that guy. Instead, he's the guy that won at Jabesh Gilead, and he knows better. And you can tell, just reading throughout, that Saul has an arrogance issue. He has a fear issue, but he also has an arrogance issue, and he can't be taught. And so, lesson one is, don't be afraid to look at our past and learn. That's something that we can all fall into. We have a selective memory. We love to forget about the teachable parts of life, the failures in life, and we love to remember the wins. And hey, remember those wins. That's important. You can learn a lot from a victory, but don't be afraid to learn from a defeat too. And then the second lesson that I gathered from this is don't double down on a mistake or a sin. Long-term capital management doubled down on a bad trading strategy, and it cost them their fund, it cost them their reputation, and it nearly cost the global financial system. Saul did not genuinely repent and change. He doubled down on his sin. And that's something that is very applicable to us, because God will call us out. God will discipline us. And sometimes he does it through other people, and I do not like that. I don't like it. But if I'm not willing to be teachable, if I'm not willing to learn, then I'm going to lose everything. And so the lesson from these guys, these traders, or this king, is be teachable. Learn. On a brighter note, there is a shining example today of a group of people who have learned from their mistakes and failures. I speak, of course, of the Kansas Jayhawks football team. Hey, I can't pat us on the back too much. You know, that's looking at our recent victories now. You know, Kansas in 2020 lost every single football game, every single one. You think it couldn't happen, and the sad thing is that wasn't the first time. A couple years earlier, they had lost every game before that too. But you know what? They went and hired a coach who knew what he was doing. Someone who actually had been overlooked for prior jobs elsewhere because he wasn't the trendy, hot, young coach that everyone else wanted. But he had won 6 national titles at a Division III school, and he knew how to win. And he came in and he helped them change how they did things. And last year, they lost the vast majority of their games, but they beat Texas, the best school in the conference, second only to Oklahoma. This year, they're undefeated. They're 4-0. So I just wanted to give a shout out to my good friend Matt Friedemann, Rock Chalk Jayhawk. Thank y'all.